Greetings, Dr. Joseph Martin here. The human search for meaning. And let's just start by saying that humanity in general has lost its purpose and meaning and lost its way, and therefore all the individuals in the world have lost their way as well. Now, obviously, this may sound like some kind of extreme, outrageous comment, but it is true. Individuals have no sense of meaning or purpose in their lives. They have a sense of emptiness. There are no feelings or emotions that fill them. They're in despair, and they feel very much alone in the world, and no connection to other people or to any other source around them. We see that every day, don't we? We see it in the fact that people are finding no meaning necessarily through any of their addictions, whether it's sex or money or gambling or relationship addiction or any of the other addictions that one has, whether it's alcohol or any other drugs, that these things do not give us a sense of happiness, nor meaning, nor purpose. We still feel at the core empty. So we're going to take a good long look here at all the aspects of how this society and individuals have lost their meaning. We're going to look at economics and ethics and education and the justice system, politics, and we're going to look at lots of different aspects of human disconnection from, of course, ourselves, but also from nature, from animals, and from the concept of love. Well, let's start at the beginning with words. You know, even words have lost their meaning in this society. Words used to carry up until before the advent of the market system that was online and the branding and marketing. Words had deep, rich symbolic meaning and purpose that held true for individuals and groups, and you could live through the deep meaning symbolically of words. Words now have been denuded of their meaning and their value and their feelings. They're simply just signs, directional signs to buy this or buy that. And in fact, through propaganda and lies, language, words have absolutely no meaning at all anymore. In fact, what George Orwell said in 1984 about doublespeak and the way that language is used in the world today, we do know that in 1984 he said that in doublespeak, lies become truth and truth becomes lies. Freedom becomes oppression and oppression becomes freedom, and love becomes hate and hate becomes love. All you have to do is listen to the news and you'll see how true this is today. Now, apart from that, we can say that the justice system, which is meant to uphold the rights of individuals and groups, has lost its way as well. There is so much racial profiling, gender profiling, sexual orientational profiling these days, and we just had a case in Missouri this week where now there is all-out pandemonium and a Holocaust on the streets in Missouri because an innocent black teenage boy or man was shot indiscriminately by a white police officer. This is simply one example of what we're saying here. Education is planned amnesia, so there is no meaning or purpose in higher education. Over the 50 years or so that I've been involved personally in the educational system and the university systems here in Canada, I have watched, sadly, as an anthropologist, the degradation of the educational system. No longer is it a place of higher learning where one can sort out all the important philosophical questions of the world, including self. Who am I? Why am I here? And what am I to do with my life while I am here? And of course, pertaining to meaning, these are the three basic questions every one of us on the planet needs to ask. Who am I? Why am I here? And what am I to do that is going to be of lasting value and a legacy while I'm here and when I'm gone? This educational system now is just a patsy for the corporations who do all the funding, for the universities and the buildings, the staff, the academics, and also for the grant and research money is all funded by corporations. And the one goal is to develop and create a whole strain of human beings called Homo-economicus, who will have some background in marketing and economics and go out there and raise money for the corporate system and become part of the system. Now, hopefully, the Gen Y and Gen X generations will see through this and find a path out of that, so more personal meaning. The end of meaning in religion back in the 1870s, 1880s, and 90s, when there was a movement afoot, not just through Nietzsche and saying God is dead, but there was more of a secular movement and even a movement within the churches back at that time. And Carl Jung has pointed this out. It was not only in his personal dreams about a big turd from God, like landing on one of the cathedrals, particularly in Basel, destroying the cathedral because there was no meaning left in the rituals, the ceremonies of these churches, whether Catholic, Protestant, and one could say the same probably for all the other faith temples of the old religions on the planet. And so people are experiencing a lack of meaning in going to these places, unless, of course, that they're tied into political entitlement and social entitlement, which is not at all the real true purpose of religion as it's meant to be in terms of its mystical, spiritual reality, which obviously is individual, whereas religion is always corporate and cultural and group-oriented and political and social. And then not to say also that all the greed and the sexual abuse of priests, not just in the Catholic churches around the world, has caused a lot of people to realize that there really is no meaning or purpose left at all in a religion as it's been given and handed down over the centuries and millennia. In many cultures of the world, religion is actually not allowed. And people of certain faiths, for instance in China, are tortured. Now, the liberation movements are very important here because historically, since Mary Wollstonecraft and so on, 1792, and then mostly through women's liberation, which really didn't start worldwide until the 1960s. And we're not just talking about women's liberation, although I do want to focus on this. Because women's liberation was meant to show that the unused, the unfelt, the unknown, the unconscious side of the other half of human nature, and I mean this in terms of the other half of our brain, which would be the right brain, and our nature as the feminine side, the feeling side, the emotional side, the connecting side, the relating side, the compassionate, kind side, the intuitive side, the reflective side, the side that has mystical metanoias and epiphanies, the side that actually incorporates the soul, whereas we know the other side, the left brain, is the logic, the ratiocination, and the positivism and the materialism of objectifying everyone and everything in the world. This logic is what rules the world and rules education, rules religion, and the women's liberation movement was meant to show that there's a deep feminine side to our nature that the patriarchy has been abusing and obliterating and killing for a couple of thousand years. And I don't just mean the killing of all the witches in the Middle Ages and so on, but right up until the present time, and still today even more so since the first wave of women's liberation in the 1960s and 1970s, which I was a part of. It seems that women still feel the need to be drawn into the corporate world, the logical world, and to deny their feminine side, unfortunately for the goodness and the beauty and the balance of their own lives. And still in the world today, it's very unacceptable for the most part for the feminine, the feeling side, the spiritual side, the intuitive side, to be brought up and balanced and integrated with the very logical side that we all have as human beings. And therein lies the misery of the lack of meaning. The lack of feeling, the lack of the feminine, the lack of emotion, the lack of connection to self, nature, and other human beings, the lack of that kind of heartfelt love is where the loss of meaning has happened worldwide. People are treated like objects. They're disposable, whether in the business world or even in the family system, and certainly in the world at large. People can be killed, even innocent civilians, as we've just had in the war between Israel and Palestine, when there are other higher motives that are pure logic with no compassion. And not to mention other liberation movements, obviously the Black Civil Rights Liberation Movement worldwide, not just in America, Britain, Europe, Africa itself, and the gay liberation movement for gays and lesbians worldwide. And again, in some countries, that is still increasingly repressive, and people are put in prison and even murdered, such as in Nigeria and in Russia. Now, as I've said, this has left the greatest sense of loneliness and despair and emptiness and meaninglessness, and I mean this psychologically and emotionally in every way on the planet. And the World Health Organization has said that the greatest mental illness, and of course mental illness is increasing and will hit 1 in 2 in the world, the greatest mental illness is loneliness, emptiness, depression, the rise of suicide, even by some very well-known comedian actors these days, and I won't mention any names, but we've just had a number of well-known people commit suicide by hanging because they felt empty and alone. Now, what is it about human nature that allows us to get to this very bad place where everything is superficial? We have to wear masks to get by in the world, even with our families and our children and our parents, and certainly with our workers and our bosses, where inside we feel absolutely empty, we're neurotic, we have so much anxiety, free-floating anxiety about everything, and all embroiled and encaged inside that unconscious mess and mass is anger and rage, road rage, internal anger, external anger, shame and guilt and embarrassment, and the lack of ability to be vulnerable and open and express ourselves, and certainly an enormous amount of sadness and grief. And emptiness comes with the meaninglessness through the sadness and grief and feeling alone or left alone. And of course, all the fears and anxieties that we feel inside. So this is a call to a higher purpose to search for meaning in your own life. Now, we could also say that there's a loss of ethnic integrity and identity as well. The right for self-determination and sovereignty determination of every ethnic and racial group, whoever they may be, whether of color or whether of religion or whether of any other status, where the larger ethnic groups of the world or nation states can bully and destroy and murder other smaller ethnic groups, which we see all the time, not just Rwanda, Serbia, the Iraqis, the Kurds, and certainly groups in Afghanistan, and in every country and nation of the world, we have this meaningless genocide of smaller ethnic groups. We don't permit them to have their own integrity and their right to life and sovereignty. And notwithstanding the very dear close fact that worldwide, the First Nations of the world have been going through genocide since the beginning of 500 years of colonization and still continuing to this day, when all their rights, privileges, land, resources, and right to education and health, their own health traditions, have been taken away from them. And here in Canada, certainly even among the Ganyangahaga, the Mohawk, and all the other First Nations in the world. There's a loss of beauty. You know, if we look at the history of art in the last 100 years, as I have when I was teaching it at the Ontario College of Art and Design in my own art college, we see that, you know, there was a sense of, before the First World War, there was a sense of beauty and newness here in Canada with the Group of Seven, for instance, who painted the mystical north and the great natural beauty of our mountains and our rivers and lakes and our prairies and plains and our oceans, and now art is simply a commodification. It's a commodity to be bought and sold. There's no attention paid on beauty or goodness or truth in that sense. You know, the true inspiration of art is to inspire us and to create a greater vision for ourselves as individuals in our lives, create some meaning, and also as a society to give us a vision for the beauty of nature and art itself and of ourselves. Now it's strictly a commodity. Everything is fallen apart. The art itself, the 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 content of the art is very political. It's very much castigating. It's very cynical. And this, of course, in a meaningless society with people who feel empty, cynicism rules over compassion. Now, the same happens with museology. Everything's a Disney World now. There's no true sense of archaeology and the true meaning and purpose of all our ancestors for 2.5 million years who brought us to the place where now we're throwing it all away in a meaningless way. And we've had 3 holocausts in the last century: the First War, the Second War, the Korean War, not to mention Vietnam and so on. And now we're definitely in danger of another Holocaust, which could happen at any time in any nation between any two groups of people. And so this meaninglessness has pervaded every aspect of our individual lives and our collective social cultural lives. And on an economic term, we could say that, and this may be the basis and the core of this kind of a deadly virus that we all seem to be have inside ourselves and our minds, where, and we don't call it the almighty dollar, we call it the devilish or the deadly dollar, the demonic dollar, because what it's turned out to be, every person in every land around the world feels the need, primary need, to go out every day and make money to pay the rent and the food and the utilities. And this has surpassed the higher needs of our nature for goodness, truth, and love, and support, and sharing, and cooperation, and the search for the true divine in ourselves, and our own peak experiences of transcendence, and knowing the spiritual in ourselves. And now we're all down in this very baseline of just looking for money every day. And we're just slaves to the dollar and slaves to money, slaves to the banks and the corporations who hold us by the throat and are shaking us upside down to see if they can get any coins out of our pockets. This anxiety that it's causing people worldwide is really another aspect of this deep meaninglessness that we have. This commodification of the human personality, where we're only seen as someone as labor or slave labor for corporations or for companies that destroy the earth, and they want people to take the oil and frack it out of the soil, and all these kinds of things. Primary, of course, has been pointed out many, many times that we've lost a sense of meaning and connection to nature. Nature and animals, we've lost our connection to animals, puppy mills to make money and so on, and we put all the animals in zoos or prisons to look at them, and yes, in a way it's nice to see them, but we are not giving them their true nature of being free creatures as they were created to be. And of course the earth is seen as commodity itself, and so even though we tend to think of ourselves as logical positivists, where everything is logical and analytical and statistical, there's no logic in destroying the earth when you know that you won't have any clean drinking water or any pesticide-free food for yourselves, your children, your grandchildren, and on for 777 generations. There's simply no logic in that. That's insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So we need to question the sanity of a meaninglessness that is pervasive in all these aspects of our individual and collective lives. So you could say there's a loss of truth and goodness as well. There are very few seemingly decent people, and the good people never seem to be the ones in power in governments or military or corporations. As this meaninglessness has pervaded individuals and families down through the generations over the last centuries, but certainly since the First World War, which just started 100 years ago, almost to the day now, we see there's increasing neuroses, increasing anxiety, increasing emptiness, and out of that, an increasing sense of psychopaths and sociopaths in the world. Some of them, unfortunately, leading and heading up the major corporations and governments of the world. And this indeed is a catastrophic and a real challenge to all the survival of all humanity and other species on planet Earth. Mostly, I guess you could say there's a loss of the future in terms of our notion of our timelines. People seem to sense that there is no future necessarily. People have a hard time creating or imagining a future and having some hope around that and some goals around it, and even a real challenge trying to attain those goals, given the fact that everyone seems to be scraping by just to put enough money in their pockets for the day and the week and the month to pay for all the bills and things that they need to pay. Now, we could also say that there is a loss of, go back to the future thing here again a bit, we could say that most people are retro. They're looking to the one great decade of the last century, which would be the 1960s. So all the music and the culture and the fashion statements and the ideas are all from the 1960s. And yet that's more than 50 years ago now. So this retro notion in most of our culture and our thinking, obviously, and this is obviously, you can understand that Marshall McLuhan said this, we're driving our car forward, looking in the rear view mirror to see where we're going. The loss of conscience is probably the biggest thing. The loss of conscience, the loss of the ability to know what is right and wrong morally and ethically in terms of yourself and your own behaviors, and helping you through addictions and so on. Taking the moral high road, being self-responsible is a key word, and self-actualizing, looking for your own higher nature and looking for creating some transcendent peak experiences spiritually and emotionally and relationally for yourselves. And this loss of conscience so that people can murder other people and get away with it, and they don't even necessarily go to jail anymore for these things. All this is unconscionable in all the examples we know of in the world today, individually and of course ethnically as well. All of this leaves us with the notion that meaninglessness is pervasive, and obviously this whole video has been on the meaninglessness and the lack of search for meaning by humans and societies on the planet. We'll have to wait for another video, and the next one I will do on Viktor Frankl, Dr. Viktor Frankl, who had a profound impact on my life, and how he helped people search for meaning in their lives, in the way that he lived his life, and also in his logotherapy, psychotherapy that he set up. But I think we could summarize all of this by saying that for the most part on the planet today, whether we know it or not, whether we're conscious of it or unconscious of it, particularly here in the Western world, there's a loss of hope, there's a loss of courage, there's a loss of strength, inner strength, there's a loss of stamina, there's a loss of acting on behalf of we know what's right, whether it's on behalf of clean, fresh water or the salmon or the bears or the wolves or this or that or any other minority group. There's a lack of kind of interest to take action on behalf of the populace. And this in itself is symptomatic of meaninglessness and emptiness and lack of direction and lack of sense of doing anything positive would make any difference, when in fact we know it does. The smallest kindness, the smallest thought, the smallest good or kind word with someone else makes a difference all the time with anyone, friend or stranger or enemy. Well, what is meaning then? Meaning can be something different and unique for every individual, but certainly it would be the search for meaning, which is an ongoing thing every day. You don't just find it hidden under a rock. It's a lifelong search, and some would say that it takes many, many, many lifetimes to find the deeper, highest meaning of the divine human nature and being. But it certainly would be around two things, or three things. It would be centered around love, and we mean here unconditional love. The kind that Einstein knew in the God that he was researching when he was looking for his quantum mechanics and the theory of relativity. He knew that the world and the universe itself, he said, is a loving place. And so it is. And I know that when you search inwards to your source, you'll see that in the universe inside your heart and soul, you will find the consciousness of that pure, true love. And along with that, the two other aspects of that are freedom and self-responsibility. So the highest meaning for a human being can be the final full liberation of your soul consciousness and your awareness as an infinite, immortal, beautiful, true, good, and loving, lovable being. And with that, of course, the only way to find that is through self-responsibility, meaning experiencing and doing only good things for yourself. And in that self-responsibility, you will find the self-realization and self-actualization of the highest peak experiences of continuous love inside your heart for yourself, all of nature, all our relations, mitukuyo yasin, and for all living beings and inorganic beings as well. Stay tuned for the next video, which we're going to do now, which is about Dr. Viktor Frankl and how he found his meaning in his life while he was in 4 different Holocaust concentration camps from 1942 to 1945. All love and blessings, Dr. Joseph Martin, to you. We're on the path for the search for meaning.